Neversleep Nights. The Druid of Grimshore. Breaking the quiet of the calm, open mudland country was the sound of a fast-moving cart pulled by a mare. The dawn was producing an amber hue to the sky and clouds of pink and yellow, indicating a dismal day ahead, though for now the land was dry and cold. The Mudlands, or often known as the Borderlands, was a relatively empty place, and as the name would suggest, it was a muddy, swampy environment, for the most part, with little land for proper fertile growth. And as it was an empty land, its many roads, even the one upon which the horse and its cart rode, were scarcely visible from disuse. Overgrown weeds, grass, and the roots of greedy trees nearby had done their best to conceal the roads and hide the tracks of carts from seasons past. But even so, the horse and its rider knew exactly where to go. Even at its speed, rumbling down the marshy meadows, the horse knew where to place her hooves. The path led towards a dell, at which stood large willow trees, their trunks bowed over the grassy trail, hiding the light of day as best they could, despite it being a season of autumn where most had night and no leaves to help them. The moment the mare galloped into the dell, the rider on the cart reining her made a noise, and the beast made a slow stop. Once again the Mudlands was quiet, save for the distant chirping of waking birds about the calm wind wafting dry, fallen leaves about the ground. The rider, after a moment, stood up and stretched his limbs and rubbed his eyes out of sleeplessness. Disembarking out of his seat, one could see that the rider was not a man as such, but a gnome. Quite a rare sight to even be seen on the surface world, where most lingered underground or hidden in glades concealed by thick forests. But he looked about the land as though he were born to the light of day. He even had a slight weathered tan to his leathery skin, indicating he was clearly a gnome of the outdoors. Though like most gnomes seen above world, he wore the typical tall pointed red hat and simple cotton and wools that defined him as a humble merchant. His eyes were sunken by his thick brow, and with a calloused hand he rubbed his big snubby nose and stroked his long bushy beard irritably. Close to the cart, hanging off its side, was a bound black leather satchel, from where he selected several carrots and brought out a woven basket, and walking stiffly to the mare, patting her on the side proudly for her effort, he placed the bowl before the beast, to which she gratefully obliged and chomped away. He then looked back behind his cart, and his face soured slightly. Stretching a bit as he briskly walked to the back of his cart, he rapped on the side of its wooden surface and waited expectantly. Silence followed, and so, huffing to himself, he walked to the back of the cart. The cart itself was big and plain, with 4 sturdy wheels and a tarpaulin cover, held up by 3-feet-high wooden scaffolds. Within the cart, it was mostly crates, barrels, and bags, bound to the cart to save it from falling during the journey. To most, if not all men, that is all they would see. But to a gnome, whose sight was naturally accustomed to the dark, he frowned at the large figure who lay slumped and hidden in a bedroll. The gnome frowned and impatiently banged his knuckles on the wooden floor of the cart. All gnomes, young and old, male and female, are naturally strong despite their short and lean stature. So when the gnome, as grizzled and old as he was, rapped on the cart with force, though not being inimical, was strong enough to make the figure in the cart jolt awake before growling back in annoyance.
Rise and shine, lazy daisy! 1, 2, 1, 2, and all that claptrap. You know the drill.
Cork it, Figlif.
Oi! I just saved your life, I have. 88 miles of hard riding, and what's my reward? Typical human cheek. Come on, rides over Randall. I've got to get this load to Kingsport by midday, and you ain't included.
I rewarded you days ago, gnome, in writing, with every last gold coin to my name.
You do know what I've just done, right? I've only went and smuggled Wrighton's most wanted out from under their very noses. They was offering a cart full of dosh, too. Could have started off a second business and paid off my daughter's dowry, but here I am, smuggling a sellsword to the middle of nowhere for only half that amount. A bit of manners wouldn't go amiss.
Oh, I am heartbroken. And it's because of me you still have a business and a daughter. Maker.
As the man began to groan awake and stagger about the cart, collecting his belongings, Figlif stood back and away, and watched the road behind him, squinting his eyes on the horizon. They were far from Wrighton, but even then Figlif had to be sure. He hadn't lived so long in his line of work by taking half measures. The man who got out was big. Standing at about 6'6", Randall was an imposing figure to be sure. Not only was it his height, but also his musculature. He had broad shoulders and powerful arms and legs and chest, with a slim waist, denoting him as a man of peak athleticism and strength. He was also beardless and as bald as an egg. He had a strong nose and jaw, a thick brow that hid his dark blue eyes. Moreover, from his attire that he equipped while on the cart, he appeared to be a man accustomed for battle. He wore leather armor on his body, along with a woolen tunic and trousers, and leather braces on his forearms. On his feet he wore worn leather boots that tucked his trousers in at the calves, and about his shoulder, held by plain bronze brooches, was a deep red cloak. He was in the middle of buckling the belt of his sheathed greatsword and hand-axe when he looked about his surroundings curiously, and saw the uncertain look on Figlif's face.
Figlif, where are we?
You wanted to get to the middle of nowhere. Well, the Mudlands is as middle of nowhere as it gets.
The Mudlands? That's the middle of everywhere, Figlif. This is the borderlands between the three realms.
I'm a smuggler, Randall. I know fully well where we bleedin' are. That being said, I didn't exactly know where you'd want to go next. And since you're in a hurry and threw a pile of coin at me, I didn't ask. So I thought you could pick for yourself. The Mudlands offers that perfect opportunity. Besides, Barentine, which is where we are, you could go to Camelon or Coromon, or if you get tired of life, the Polar Sea.
Uh-huh, I'm blessed, truly.
Blazes, man, you're sick.
Not exactly.
The man unbuckled his leather torso armor, and pulled the top of his tunic down, so the left side of his chest was visible, where a festering wound besmirched his skin. It was a massive black scab, the size of a hand, but at the center of it was bleeding a mixture of blood and pus. Figlif stood back with a grimace.
Yeah. Crossbow bolt got me through at the quayside. I didn't know it was poison till I was changing my clothes in the merchants' district.
Gods below, Randall! What did you do to make Ptolemy and his lot want to kill you that bad, eh?
Doesn't matter now. But I don't think I'll be going back to Wrighton City for a long time. Poison? A damn woman's weapon. My damn muscles feel as though they're being eaten by maggots. Figlif, I need a healer. Can you get me to Kingsport?
No can do. Who knows who'd be watching or listening? I've still got a reputation for discretion in writing. They find out that I smuggled you out, then I might as well throw myself in the sea.
Ah, Figlif, I won't last a day out here.
Got gold?
What gold?
Any gold. To smuggle you into Kingsport, by gone, it'll be bleeding tough to do. But for the right amount of gold, we'll see what I can manage.
Well, Figlif, you know I don't have any gold. I gave you every coin I had to get the hell out of the city.
Then, in that case, this sounds like a you problem.
Ah, damn you, gnome. Then, at least tell me if there's a healer around here. Maker's sake, I saved your sorry beer twice, and rescued your daughter from Barson, remember? So you at least owe me some charity.
Well, I've heard of someone nearby who can heal people, though he might not be the best for whatever's going on your chest.
Figlif, just tell me where to go, and I'll start walking, yeah?
They call him Osmund. He's some druid that lives near the coast, not far from here, twixt Barentine and Coromon. He's a typical druid, reclusive, loves trees and all that claptrap. Last I heard, he was setting up a grove on the coast to help some borderland hamlets and start a circle or something or other. As you know, the Mudlands forest is full of your favourite people. Bandits, monsters and madmen. So if you start walking to your right and into the woods now, you could reach his grove by evening. But you could have a fight on your hands. Although, you could also go around the forest, but I'd reckon you'd reach Osmund by, maybe tomorrow morning? Oh, Randall, wait! One more thing. Word has spread among my contacts. An ogre prowls this land. They don't know how it got here. Whether Camelon or Coromon set it loose to cause chaos against the other further west. But this ogre has been raiding the hamlets, scaring the tribes, eating the travelers, and honestly just being very bad for business. My last charity would be to tread carefully. So there you have it. Fare thee well, and all that claptrap.
Randall looked about him, ignoring the sounds of Figlif making his way onward to the distant town of Kingsport, and surveyed the area. To remind him of his current situation, a shot of pain blasted within his chest. The poison was spreading. Of that, Randall knew. It had been no lowly thug that had shot him. Ptolemy recruited only the best to catch or kill. It was not just the pain that ailed him, but also a faint sense of nausea and annoyance to the light, though perhaps the latter may be a side effect from dwelling too long in the tall, squalid city streets and alleyways of Ryton. In a sense, he was glad to be away from there. He reckoned he'd be a lot happier without the pain and certainty of death that awaited him. Fueling himself with a mighty breath that came out as a growl, he climbed up on the right side of the sloping woods and made his way to the grove of Osmund. The day was frankly uneventful, despite the known fact that the Mudland Woods, due to its dense thickness and chaotic terrain, made it the perfect hiding place for fugitives, outlaws, and broken men. Also concealed within the forest were its indigenous populations. There were some humans, painted ones, who had broken away from man's advancement and squatted alone with their totems and shrines and danced with their spirits under the influence of the lotus that grew locally deep within the swamps. They fought an eternal war with other races, more monstrous races within. The Blamier, creatures made from mud and slime that looked like men, save they had no head, and bore a human-like face on their naked torso. The Brugs, squat, gnome-sized and barely sentient amphibians that walked on two legs and roved about and around the forest with crude spears and slings. The list went on. Goblins, redcaps, even supposed spirits and banshees were said to dwell inside the forest. Though Randall did not know the truth of these claims, nor was he intending to find out, especially in his condition. It was mid-afternoon by the time Randall caught sight of the grey polar sea. He'd kept himself close to the perimeter of the forest, making sure that if anyone saw him from outside, he could easily slink into the darkness of the forest, and should there be a creature lurking in the forest for him, then a quick sprint to the open long grassy fields would afford him a good area to hide. Or so he hoped. For now, Randall would not let doubt seep into his mind. He was a man on a quest, for which an hourglass ran fast. For catching sight of the polar sea, he retched once more, and the pain in his arm made him convulse. The pain itself was growing and spreading like a cancer. Randall heaved his mighty body onwards as his resolve to stifle his panic grew weaker by the hour. Randall was not a native of these lands, but his homeland was not far either. Beyond the twin nations of Coromand and Camelon, and beyond the Dragon King's sea lay Humberland, a surprisingly peaceful, if not slightly boring land. But Randall had forsaken that life and led nothing but an adventurous and risky life. In his youth he joined the Lord's army, and later somewhere along the lines he lost his way and become a sellsword. Sellswords were dogs of war, landless men, faithless men, folk who would kill a newborn or their own mother for the right amount of coin. But Randall was no thoughtless brute. He chose his jobs as carefully as he could, ensuring that he would not feel regret if he joined this lord's army or helped in a kidnapping or heist. It's fair to say, however, that he did. Night fell quickly on the Mudlands. The day had been chilly with a slow autumn wind, and the sky a collection of grey tufts of clouds below a pale sky. But with night, the sky transitioned to a clear dark blue, the stars twinkling softly at the quiet land in which the dying mercenary trudged. Randall was breathing raggedly as though he'd run 10 marathons. His backpack and greatsword, accessories he had never even felt when on his adventures, were now like a ton of bricks about him, weighing him down, forcing him to sweat harder as a swelling pain grew within. The poison spreading, corrupting him. He found solace that now night had come, he didn't have to squint his eyes from the light, and also he found he was now reaching the cliff edge for which below was the rocky coastline of Grimshore. The moon was large, white and glowing in the sky. Somehow the lunar light did not hurt Randall's eyes, and he could see the quiet polar sea below all the way to the horizon. A few feet before the edge, he stood there, scanning the area. The gnome had advised him to check the coastline for the Druid, for that was where his lonely grove dwelt. But alas, perhaps he was too far above the coast to see anything specifically, but he could not see a grove below. Randall lurched his back down and got on all fours suddenly as he retched once more over the cliff, after which he shook and aggressively tore away his backpack and unbuckled his belt, and rolled onto his side, shivering from the pain that shot up his nerves. After a moment, he decided to look at the poison's superficial effects. Unbuckling his leather jerkin and undressing his torso, he suddenly swore with a cry as he saw the state of his chest and arm. It looked gangrenous, black and green, rotting with yellow pustules and blood. Yet oddly enough he could still move it and feel it. A good sign at least. He would not be losing an arm just yet. There on the coast, Randall rested, slowly laying out his camp for the night, As far as he could still tell, he was still in the part of the mudlands that bordered Barentine, where Wrighton resided. Dying or no, he was still a wanted man by a very powerful man. He'd rather die in the free air than be captured, cured and imprisoned for the rest of his life. And what a life he'd led, Randall thought to himself as he tucked himself into his bedroll and drank from his water skin. He'd left his home to fight for the notions of glory, honor and good, at an age where most of his childhood friends had gone to be married, start families and tend to their gardens in Humberland. Randall had longed for adventure and action, and he had received both. He took the sword to be his way of life, and it had led him down a path of violence, loss and strife. What had once been a young 14-year-old boy with dreams of knighthood had corroded, and after his first taste of that life, he had become a dog of war. Staring at the moon that watched him from the sky above, he recalled how he had promised to someone he loved very deeply that he would never go back to being the man he had been corrupted to be. And he had done his best to stay true to his promise. He did. But Randall had chosen his destiny long ago. A man of the sword will never walk a trail without shedding blood along the way. Even when escorting convoys or sending messages, he had found that there was always at least someone on the road to challenge his way. Randall chuckled with a pain as he discovered for the first time in a very, very long time he'd never reflected the actual mortality of his own life. He had fought in shield walls, skirmishes, raids and sieges that would have made most veterans shiver upon memory, and yes, there had been plenty of moments where he almost died had it not been for quick reaction or luck. But those would have been fleeting quick deaths, where it would have been over in a moment. Right here and now he was dying a slow and painful death, where he was recounting his sins and deeds, his loves and loss, and triumphs and regrets. For the first time in his life he found himself lost, lonely, lacking a purpose. All his life he had fought for coin, or in his youth for the adoration of his peers or betters. But what did that matter now? The coin was meaningless and worthless compared to his health, which was in the hands of a supposed druid who had no use for it anyway. And those he had tried to impress were not here now to save him. Even if they were, would they even help him? Even Figlif had only helped him as a service. He had spent life as a warhound and adventurer, but he had not had a moment to truly reflect on himself. He was no aimless reaver. He may have been a sellsword, but unlike others, he had held a modicum of honor and a code of conduct. He despised other sellswords for their absolute desire for coin, men who murdered innocents as a dare waited with a pouch. Randall was sure that if he was to leave this earth tonight, his soul would never be sent down to the gates of hell where those men would be cast. His thoughts were becoming too dark for his liking. He turned his attention to the moon and stars, how beautiful they looked, and the calm waters and quiet wind also made him remember home, his real home, where he had been born and raised. When he was a bairn, he would often look to the stars and ask his mother what they were. She said they were diamonds held there by the power of the Maker, the creator of all things, the greatest. And if you were good, one of those stars would fall from the sky and land into your hands, a gift from the Maker himself for your good deeds. Randall smiled as he did then at hearing his mind repeat the scenario. Hearing her mother's words and then hearing his father's sleep-talking before the whole house being alerted by his newborn sister's bawling in the next room, and how he would often look up to the sky from his quiet village. Suddenly, Randall began to feel himself drifting away to sleep as his mind took him down the memory lane of a happy time, a peaceful time, an innocent time, a better time. And it was in that moment, as he fell to slumber, that his heart and soul found a new purpose. Randall longed to return home. If he was to be alive tomorrow, whether he gained a cure or not, he swore silently to himself that he would like to make his way home for the first time in 14 years. He didn't die. The gentle drizzle of rain and the pain in his body gave it away. It was not as strong as last night, but he knew, like a toothache, it would ramp up gradually as the day went by. Taking advantage of his rest and feeling somewhat energized, now that he had a goal as opposed to just running away and wandering aimlessly, he quickly packed his camp up and got dressed. The cliff was a steep descent, but not unable to be climbed. Upon descending to the shore, he flinched momentarily at seeing 3 men at the shoreline who were currently readying their rowboat away from the shore. From the looks of them, they appeared to be simple fishermen, and from the suspicious way they reacted in turn, just as Randall did, he sensed a curiosity about them.
Hi there! I seek a druid who lives around these parts, the Druid of Grimshore. You know where I can find him? Or his grove?
The men called back, but not in the common tongue. The language they spoke sounded similar to native Coromand, so either they were from northern Coromand or they were pretending not to understand him, the latter seeming more plausible by the way one of the men chuckled.
Osmund? His name is Osmund the Druid.
The 3 men understood that name, without a doubt, and all 3 of them looked northwards along the coast before quickly scampering away, getting ready to make sail, their faces all of a sudden ashen and fearful. So Osmund had a dire reputation locally. That didn't sound good, Randall thought grimly. But he'd gotten this far, and who knows their reason for their fear? Druids held the power of nature in their hands. It was even said that they could speak to animals and commune with forces of nature. That alone was enough to make anyone respect or fear a druid. Randall growled and shrugged, lumbering his way along the coast, along the general direction where they had looked. It was noon when he saw it. There, jutting out alone on the coast, was a staff that was little more than a collection of sturdy, thin branches bound together with vines, from which hung druidic symbols woven together and made from grass and twigs from the forest above. On the head of the staff was a decapitated ram's head, the blood drained, its skin sunken and saggy, and its eyes plucked away by gulls. It was a totem, and Randall sneered at the sight. He hated magic and distrusted its users, even potentially helpful ones, but he was out of options in his state. But at least it told him he was close to Osmund now, or at least to someone. The totem indicating he was getting closer to finding the druid. And yet, as Randall walked on past the totem, he could not help but sense a feeling of creeping dread in his gut. It was not simply his wary attitude to magic that he felt was causing this, but something else. The land was too quiet. Even the sea by his right, the waves wafted slowly to shore in an almost timid fashion, as though the very waves themselves were afraid to near any closer to the coast. Perhaps it was the poison, making him paranoid or simply mad. Scanning the area around him before looking behind him where the totem stood erect, all colour from his face drained and he froze. The head of the ram was now facing him. The totem was alive, and something about those eyeless sockets of darkness made Randall swallow. For from within those empty holes he knew in his soul that someone was watching him. Then it spoke.
Trespasser, what be thy business in my land? Speak thy name so that I might know thee, and declare thy reasons for your stumbling foolery. Speak swiftly, unwisely, trespasser. I do not tolerate stuttering fools.
I am Randall Blackstone. I am not a trespasser. I am here for Osmund. I need help. I was shot with a poison bolt that ravages my body as I speak. I am close to death, and may still yet die before the day is done if I am not cured. Is he here?
Another desperate fool who yearns for Osmund's miracles, begging for another day of his fleeting life.
Is he here, or is mockery all you can give?
That is the question, Randall Blackstone. I oughtn't be here. Keep walking, and enter the alcove. Osmund shall await you.
Randall had half a mind to strike their head from its staff, but since magic was involved, he did not want to risk being hexed or cursed. Following the totem's command, he continued along the coast and reached a small alcove, which further led to a rocky valley inland. He had noticed that the land had become considerably foggy.
Blackstone, I was hoping you'd come.
There, at the end of the valley of the cliff face, there was a cave that from within a figure robed in black and gold emerged, clutching another totem, except this one had a human skull instead of a ram's head.
Welcome to my humble realm for the weak and needy. Search is poison, I can help with that, but with my help there comes a price.
I thought as much with you damn sorcerers! Is it alchemy gold you need? We're firstborn? Know now that I have neither with me.
Do not mistake me for a covetous hag who bargains for gold or kin. I have no use for such meager gifts. Nay, what I require of you is what I require from all who come to beg for Osmund's aid. A challenge, a duel.
What? What kind of druid asks for such a thing?
Osmund is not asking. I am.
What? What do you mean? Who the hell are you?
I am whom you will appease in return for Osmund's cure. And you will appease me, as all others have done.
The druid spread his arms wide and began to levitate steadily closer to Randall, who in turn staggered back, drawing his sword defensively. And slowly the dense fog began to swirl and evaporate away, unveiling a rotting garden of men and women impaled on spears or tied to desiccant crosses, all of whom had died gruesome, bloody and brutal ways. Some had pox-like skin, others leprosy, and some with stump arms or legs, who'd presumably come to this place in hopes for a new limb. This was a slaughterhouse. He had knowingly entered to the home of a fiend.
You're a monster.
Nay, I promise a cure. That I swear to you, Randall Blackstone. If you can defeat my champion yonder.
Randall looked back gingerly as the druid pointed towards the sea behind him. There, standing like a statue, was a large man, both in height and width. There the figure stood wearing glossy plated armour, black as night, with a helm shaped to that of a fiendish grinning face, with a red plume on the top. On his belt was an arsenal of weapons, a great sword, a mace, a flail and a longsword, all made in proportion to his gigantic size. The Druid beckoned the champion slightly with a flick of his fingers, and the giant walked slowly and silently closer, stopping only 30 feet away from Randall when Osmund put his palm out.
If thou wish to delay death for a moment longer, then prove it. Fight and slay my champion, and beg you entertain me with a good doom. I just enjoy the sight of desperate mortals fighting for hope. Fail me or flee. Oh, the pain that courses through thy body will be but a morsel compared to the torment my wrath will bring upon thee.
Damn, Druid! My body is failing me, and you ask me to duel against that?
Hast thou not endured a journey to come to mine own land? Thou art a local man, to that I am certain. Why should one more challenge before thee hinder thine hope of a cure?
So be it!
Randall made a charge against the knight with a growl, going in for an overhead swing with his greatsword. The knight unsheathed his own greatsword and with surprising speed parried the blow and punched Randall in the chest with his gauntleted fist, sending Randall flying and crashing into the dirt. Osmund stood further away now, spectating. He laughed impishly as the duel began. Gritting his teeth and wincing in pain as his infected chest began to bleed and dampen his tunic, he glared at the knight who stood there, facing him, waiting. This wasn't his first duel, Randall thought, and by the Maker it would not be his last. Gripping his greatsword again, this time advancing his foe with more care, he looked for a weak spot or kink in the armour. The eyes of the helmet would get his sword tip through, but the man was so tall that he would need to trip the knight first. He swung his sword upwards to lacerate the armour. The knight parried and went to hit him again, but Randall ducked and stepped sideways, slashing his armour above the hip. But his sword, though sharpened and strong, simply screeched and caused sparks. The sword leaving not even a scratch on the obsidian plate. The knight was quick, but not that quick. It heaved its sword one-handed like a club to cleave Randall in two, but he sidestepped again and jabbed his sword on the knight's leg where the armour revealed chainmail and tunic. But again, the same thing happened. Not a scratch. Enchanted, Randall swore to himself. Of course the knight would be wearing enchanted armour. Sorcerers, Druid or any, never played fair. He should have known better. He staggered back as the knight went to kick him in the chest with his pointed armoured foot, an attack that would have impaled him from chin to skull had it hit. He was a fair distance from the advancing knight, who had clearly grown tired of waiting for Randall to advance and was now on the offense. Randall took out his hand axe and threw it at him, but alas, it ricocheted off his armour as though it were a pebble to a wall. His infected arm was now pulsating with pain anew as his dying muscles ached at each swing of his sword. The world was going dark and hazy before him, the valley and the night becoming nothing but black shadows before him.
Such a pitiful fool. I had hoped for more of a warrior such as thou seem. Perhaps life is not what thou doest, for after all, to remain in my garden, your body my decor, and your soul mine to consume. Perhaps that is what thou desire.
Randall raged against the knight with an unholy fury as he heard the druid's mocking words. Charging again, he clashed his sword against the giant, and they were locked in a clinch. Randall screamed with rage and with pain as he held his ground, until with all his heart and sinew he pushed his sword against his, making the giant recoil back. Randall's blood was up, and he stood there, his shoulders slumped, his guard down, clutching his sword lazily, its tip in the dirt. It was then that he saw a difference. He saw the giant's breastplate at where their swords had hit. There was a scratch. Randall's entire mind shook with the revelation. The giant's weapons were also enchanted, and so only they could pierce his armor. Just then, Randall forgot his pained body and lumbered furiously towards the giant. The latter hungrily accepted, stomping towards him and preparing for a heavy overhead attack. Randall followed suit, charging like a madman. Just before they met, Randall feinted a swing, before bobbing himself to sidestep, and got as close as he could, forcing the knight to step away, but not before Randall had grabbed the mace on his belt, and not waiting for chance. Praying for a result, he swung it hard on the knight's lower leg. It pierced right through, and the knight howled a deep, low scream of agony as Randall tore it out and staggered back. The duel had been levelled. No more was Osmund's face an impish grin, and the giant knight now shied away from the mercenary. Dropping his greatsword and wielding the mace with his right hand, he advanced. The knight cautiously stepped forward, his own life clearly now at risk. The knight went in for another overhead swing that Randall stood back from. He came to the realization that this knight did not know how to fight properly, or fairly. He seemed to throw wild swings and use thuggish brute tactics. Randall feinted, making the knight flinch. He feinted again, and once more the knight bridled back. Was he scared or stupid? Randall thought. Upon his third feint, the knight didn't flinch or move, and instead gripped his greatsword for a wild slash. Randall ducked the swing and got close, swiping his legs with savage blows that, despite he was weak and ill, proved to disable the giant and bring him to his knees. He swung his mace downwards onto the knight and brought it crashing down onto his skull, the metal shattering like it were paper, and blood, bone, and brain matter all exposed and mashed. The knight fell to the ground face first, while Randall also fell to the side. Exhausted, in agony, and in disbelief of his victory. The fog about the sea beyond the valley had gone, to reveal a grey sea beneath the palest blue sky, dense with dark cloud.
Thank you, Randall.
Now get away from me!
It's all right, Randall. It's me, Osmund. You vanquished the ogre and broke the curse that bound us to the spirit.
Randall looked slowly around to see Osmund kneeling on the ground behind him, his hand on his staff, and his fell mask off his face, revealing a beardless man in his senior years with long hair slucked back, his pale blue eyes gentle and sad, the evil and venom in his voice gone.
You were cursed.
Tis sad to say. I was a fool not to expect it in such a land close to the forest. The ogre had made its way here, destroying and eating all it could before it made its lair in this cove. I came here to banish it, or at most slay it after its crimes against the balance of nature. Had it not entered that cave, I would have been successful. But there be in that cave a forbidden shrine to a forgotten deity, a spirit, captive to a sealed cauldron. When I caught the ogre, he was preparing to sup on some farmers and livestock. Oh, He opened the cauldron that had been sealed for who knows how long, and there we were, hexed, bound and enslaved to the will of a fiend, to be used and killed at his pleasure. 'Twas here that sick folk from nearby came to beg for help, and I would have gladly given it, had my mind belonged to me. But alas, it was a fiend that made me watch as it forced my hands to craft fell totems and impale bodies of the ogre's dues, and I forced to utter obscene spells in that cave of abysmal darkness. I cannot change what has happened. I can only beg Mother Nature's understanding and forgiveness in what my body has done. All I can do is focus on what to do now, which would be to cure you, Randall, for which I thank you once more, friend. Now please show me your wound, and I'll examine it.
Randall could not help but feel a slight pity for the Druid. He had himself seen many evils in the world, but being forced to endure them, unable to turn away at least, was a torment of itself. He obeyed and removed his jerkin and tunic with Osmund's help to reveal a chest and arm blacked, gangrenous and bleeding, stinking of pus and blood and muscles ruptured from the heavy exertions of the fight, making Randall avert his head from the stench. But Osmund, clearly no stranger to such things, touched it and ripped a small strip of the corroded flesh, making Randall wince.
Aye, widow leech and boiled redwood. A common concoction I've seen before in my youth as a sage. Aye, I think I have just the right thing. Can you stand? Come, I have a hut above the cliff at the entrance of the forest. A safe grove of sorts. A couple of days and you'll be on your way. I must say you fought with the fury of a mad man of battle. I never saw such focus in a dying man. What made you fight so hard?
Home.